The room appeared untouched.
Gray carpet, unremarkable in texture. A polished wooden table with chairs perfectly aligned. Walls bare of marks or damage. The police report called it pristine, the sort of scene where nothing could have happened. And yet, for the forensic team, pristine meant nothing. They knew better. It was not the first time investigators had walked into a room and seen only cleanliness. It would not be the last, because violence does not always announce itself with chaos. It often leaves traces invisible to the naked eye, quietly waiting to speak. Detective Elise Harmon observed the room carefully. She did not speak. She did not move anything. She only watched the shadows in the corners, the light catching on surfaces where a hand might have rested. A drop might have landed long ago. The luminol test had arrived the night before, a chemical reagent that fluoresces in the presence of blood, even if it had been cleaned, diluted, or degraded. It was a tool that transformed ordinary walls and floors into silent witnesses, exposing the stories that official records had missed or overlooked. In the case of the Williams cold case, the house had been searched multiple times. Every surface examined, every drawer opened, every closet inspected. Police files described it as exhaustively cleared. The statements of the families, neighbors, and friends providing little to go on. No one could explain the disappearance of Sarah Williams, or why no physical evidence had remained. Elise's team worked methodically. They darkened the room, coating the area with the faint blue glow of luminol as the chemical spread across the surfaces. At first, nothing happened. A faint sheen here, a trace there, barely noticeable. And then the pattern began to emerge. The glow revealed a trail. It moved across the floor, stopped at the edge of the carpet, and continued up the baseboard. It was subtle, almost like a whisper. A previous investigation would have overlooked it entirely. But the test did not lie. It did not care about appearances, about assumptions, about the months that had passed. The blood, however faint, remained a witness. Elise traced the pattern carefully. It was not chaotic. It was deliberate, measured. A person moving in specific steps, interacting with the environment in a precise way. The angle suggested Sarah had attempted to reach something, or someone had forced her along that line. The room told a story. It was not the story the first responders had recorded. It contradicted the official narrative. The original investigation had concluded that there was no struggle, that the apartment had been left as if the victim had departed willingly. But the luminol revealed hidden resistance, subtle but undeniable. A handprint faintly outlined on the edge of the counter, a smear on the floorboard invisible to daylight. Every trace, every chemical reaction became a timestamp of sorts, a frozen moment in the timeline. The technology did not recreate memories. It did not conjecture motives. It only revealed presence and interaction. And in this case, presence mattered more than conjecture. The team documented everything. Photographs under the ultraviolet light captured patterns that would otherwise vanish in the bright daylight. Each fluorescent trace was meticulously mapped, cross-referenced with old reports, witness statements, and prior evidence logs. Elise could feel the weight of the room, not the walls, not the furniture, but the story itself. It was patient, silent, waiting for someone who understood how to listen. Outside the room, the public would read the original reports and assume the case was cold. The leads exhausted, the trail gone. Inside, the forensic team was uncovering proof that the story had only been hidden, not lost. The first chapter of the investigation ended not with an arrest or a revelation, but with understanding. That crime leaves invisible footprints. That time cannot erase presence entirely. And that luminol is the lens through which the unseen becomes undeniable. The night deepened. The small blue glows flickered across walls and floorboards. Forensic analysts worked in silence, tracing each line and mark, piecing together Sarah's last movements. What had seemed like nothing was beginning to speak. And the story was just beginning. The apartment had transformed into something unrecognizable. The walls and floors, once ordinary, now pulsed faintly with the glow of luminol. Each line, each smear, each ghostly handprint told a story that had gone unnoticed for decades. Detective Elise Harmon crouched near the carpet edge, a flashlight cutting through the darkness as her eyes adjusted to the eerie, fluorescent patterns. The traces were faint but unmistakable. They moved across the living room, looping around furniture, climbing subtly toward the hallway where the original investigation had declared no evidence of struggle. Her forensic partner, analyst Victor Reyes, whispered, "Look at the pattern near the doorway. It's consistent with someone resisting, trying to escape." They didn't leave voluntarily. Elise nodded, absorbing the significance. Luminol had done what no witness had, what no camera or report could. It had preserved the invisible. Blood had once pooled, then been wiped away, cleaned meticulously to avoid detection. But the chemical didn't lie. The residue had been left behind in nearly imperceptible quantities. They followed the trail down the hall to the bedroom. A smear on the floor caught Elise's eye, a faint, almost imperceptible glow. She knelt, tracing it with her gloved hand. The pattern suggested the victim had struggled, spun around, and been forced toward the bed. There, the glow intensified, a cluster of stains that indicated a moment of violence far more significant than previously thought. The forensic team documented every angle, photographing and mapping the patterns in detail. Each image was layered over old reports and floor plans, reconstructing a timeline invisible to investigators decades ago. Digital forensics had also uncovered something crucial: old security footage from a neighboring building. While the video quality was poor, cross-referencing timestamps and the luminol trail confirmed the suspect had entered the apartment at the exact time inconsistencies had been reported. Small but undeniable. As they pieced together the timeline, the picture became chillingly clear. What had seemed like a minor cold case, one where authorities had assumed the victim had disappeared voluntarily, was actually a carefully concealed crime. Every prior assumption had been challenged. Every "nothing to see here" report was now undermined. Elise's mind turned to the people involved. The original investigators, the neighbors, the witnesses, all had been working with what they could see. They had no way of detecting the invisible truth. Only the science could now speak where words and memories had failed. Victor pointed to a corner near the living room window. "This isn't just residual transfer, it's a path. Look at the drag marks, they lead outside." Outside, the forensic team found more traces. Faint smudges on the window frame, microscopic blood particles on the sill, and fibers that matched clothing recovered in storage from the original investigation. Luminol had extended the scene beyond what anyone thought possible. The apartment had been a silent storyteller, and now its voice was loud and clear. Elise felt a mix of awe and urgency. Cold cases were often closed because they lacked visible evidence. But what the eye cannot see, the science reveals. Luminol turned invisible history into undeniable proof. By the early hours of the morning, the patterns were fully documented. The story was no longer hidden. What had been overlooked, dismissed, or cleaned was now illuminated in glowing blue. The evidence reconstructed a sequence of events that contradicted the original assumptions. The victim had resisted, been confronted with violence, and ultimately led to the exact location where prior investigators had failed to detect any sign of struggle. It was a breakthrough not just for this case, but for the principle itself. Time cannot erase presence. Crime leaves traces, and modern forensic tools can find them long after witnesses forget, memories fade, and reports are filed. Luminol was more than a chemical. It was a historian, a witness, a truth-teller. Elise documented the final frame, saved it to the case file, and looked around the room one last time. Every line of glow, every invisible smear, had rewritten the narrative. The cold case was no longer cold. The story of Sarah Williams could now finally be told in full, through the evidence she never forgot to leave behind. Forensic science does not judge, it does not speculate. It simply reveals what has already occurred, hidden in plain sight. And in this case, the hidden truth would speak louder than decades of assumptions. If you thought the past was gone, think again. Subscribe to Silent Evidence Files to uncover more stories where science exposes the truth behind the seemingly unsolvable. Hit the bell, like, and share, because even the coldest cases can't hide from evidence that refuses to remain silent.